Thank you so much, City of Albuquerque, for having me. When I heard that this was happening, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I love to do. So I got into financial literacy through Junior Achievement, and if anybody has heard of Junior Achievement, it's financial literacy for kids in elementary school. So I've been volunteering with Junior Achievement since 2018. Started volunteering with United Way, teaching high school students about financial literacy, and then my mom was working at C&M. She was like, you should really apply. We have a financial literacy instructor position open. So I was working at Sandia Labs at the time, and so I applied. So I've been teaching financial literacy at C&M for 6 years, and so that is what led me to a career change to actually start working with adults, and now as a financial planner, I get to continue to talk to them about financial literacy. So super, super happy to be here. Okay, so these are all the very super fun, sexy topics we're going to talk about today. Everybody's like, okay, paychecks, boring. Okay, so we're going to talk about paychecks. That's the first step of really knowing how can you start saving if you don't even understand the input of what's coming in, right? You have to understand where your income's coming from. 56 to 61% of people don't have any clue what their income or expenses are. They don't look at it at all. So we're going to understand the basics. Got to start there. Everything else builds. Got to understand your income, your paycheck, what's getting taken out, banking, borrowing, and saving. I'm going to leave that to Vanessa and Rada to really talk about the importance of banking, but we'll have a slide with some terms. Again, the importance of credit, why it matters, predatory lending, scams, risk, and insurance. Managing your risk in your life is massive. And then we're going to talk about taxes. As a CPA, I absolutely love taxes. I know everyone here is like, wow, you're the biggest nerd in this room. It's true. And then lastly, investing. Again, you kind of start with, hey, we got to figure out how to understand our paycheck, work your way up to long-term goals that you have, the importance of investing. So that's kind of the last thing we'll talk about. Here's an example picture of a pay stub, right? Everybody's looked at this. At least I hope you've looked at it within the last year, everyone's paycheck. So key terms are over here. I'm going to move to this side. Looking at your paycheck and actually understanding what's coming in is key as the starting point, right? And really understanding what your cash flow looks like and how frequently you're getting paid is another thing that's really important to understand. Hey, when is my paycheck going to hit my account? Do I get paid weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, right? It's not every 2 weeks. You maybe get paid. My wife's an APS teacher. She gets paid twice a month, but it's different times. So understanding how to manage those cash flows, when are the expenses coming in, what are the deductions that are hitting your paycheck? So all these terms that are over here, right? You're going to have to pay federal taxes. We'll talk about taxes kind of at the end. State taxes, Social Security, Medicare tax. If you're contributing to a 401k or a pension, that's going to be a deduction. So really important to take a look at your pay stub, understand what's coming out. And when we talk about taxes at the end of the year, if you owe money, that's up to you to update your W-4 so that more federal tax comes out. All that equation is when you're doing your refund at the end of the year is understanding, do you owe the government more money or did you actually take more out of your paycheck than you needed to? So really important to understand your paycheck, start here, understanding the pay frequency so you know the cash flow, and then we can kind of go to the next slide. Rough kind of rule of thumb here when we start talking about budgeting, if you've heard of just a basic high-level tip, the 50, 30, 20 rule for basic budgeting. I personally don't like to budget myself, but everybody has to kind of find what works for them. What I like to do is actually start with the bottom, the 20%. So I automate my savings and then I spend the rest. So it's called reverse budgeting. You could do that, or if you want to, you can follow this and you can really get into the nitty-gritty. Dave Ramsey talks about doing the envelope method. So if you're like, I really want to understand where my money's going, you could allocate $100 for groceries for a week and you would put the cash in there. You wouldn't touch anything else, no credit cards, right? So this is just a strategy that you can use if you're looking at your expenses. Okay, we talked about the things that you need versus the things that you want. Really understanding big ticket purchases too. We talk about what can get people in trouble. It's exactly what Treasurer Montoya just talked about. The big trucks, buying a house that you can't afford. Understanding because interest rates are so high right now, the average monthly payment for a mortgage is $4,000 a month. So maybe it makes sense to rent and find roommates, really looking at how can you reduce kind of those needs and your basic costs, and then seeing how you can save and really try and target having 20% either going into savings or paying off debt And paying off debt is something that, as you start to understand how to budget, understanding your paycheck, understanding your expenses, that gives you the amount that you have left over to save, which can then tackle debt, right? So if you've got credit card debt or you've got student loans, you can't understand and come up with a plan to do those things unless you understand how much you have left over each month, right? So it might be tough initially to kind of look, okay, this is going to be tough. I don't really want to look at my finances. It's a lot easier to just ignore it and just try and live paycheck to paycheck. But if you want to make progress on your medium, long-term goals, you got to do these first steps. So this is the whole slide on banking, borrowing, and saving. So important to know the difference between banks and credit unions. This is always something I go over with my students. Banks are for-profit companies. They really are in business for their shareholders. Not a bad thing, but credit unions are nonprofits. They typically give back benefits to their members in the form of higher interest rates if you're lending money to them, CDs, money markets, and lower rates when they're lending to you. So Bank on Berkey, they have examples of both banks and credit unions. They're both great, but it's good to know the difference there. Talked a lot about mobile banking. These guys are going to talk a lot about the importance of being banked. If you don't have a bank, how can you set up direct deposit? How can you pay your bills? How can you build credit? How can you invest for the long run, right? These are all really important reasons why it's important to kind of, as you start to gain momentum, the reasons why you need to have a bank, because it's going to move your future forward. Why is it important to have a good credit score? When I teach financial coaching, we do this exercise where I say, okay, you have a family member that's come to you, they need $1,000. You decide to lend it to them or not. And they start asking me all these questions. Well, I don't know. Like, how do I know if they're going to pay it back? And I'm like, I don't know. What questions would you ask them? Well, do they have a job? Do they have a good history of paying me back? Do they have collateral? So these are all things that you have to think about from the perspective of a bank. If you're ever trying to get a loan, they want to know those things about you. That's what a credit score is. Are you responsible? Are you going to be accountable? Do you have a history of paying things back on time? So that's why it's really important to know what your credit score is, work to build it so that it's higher. That's your financial reputation, and that's going to allow you to succeed, allow you to get a mortgage in an auto loan at a much lower rate than someone who has a bad loan. Or if you're unbanked, your credit invisible. So you go say, okay, I want to get a house. They're like, well, you're in the family member example. Well, you've never lent to any, or you've never paid money back to another family member. So how do I know if you're going to pay me back, right? That's why it's really, really important to work on that credit score. Lower rates, it's going to give you access to liquidity, access to lending. So then people say, okay, all right, start working on building my credit. I got a bad credit score. How do I improve it, or how do I build it? So these are the things that you can do. The first step that I would recommend, if you haven't, you can go to www.annualcreditreport.com, and they basically any of these credit agencies, you can see what your credit score is, and it'll give you a full list of your credit report. Your credit report's going to show you all your existing history of loans you've taken out, if you've made good payments. You want to look at that because there could have been identity theft. Someone could have taken out loans in your name, and that's why you have a bad credit score. Or you at least understand, okay, it might be lower because this and this. I'm going to work on these areas. So what can you do to improve your credit? A lot of people will say, only have one credit card, that's it. If you have really bad tendencies, then maybe so, but actually having a lot of different lines of credit and proving that you can pay it back on time is really going to be really important to show and build credibility. So making sure that you make payments on time, creating those budgets and sticking to them, keeping only one credit card for emergencies, and paying more than the minimum balances. So when you have a credit card payment that's due that says, oh, minimum balance, $20, don't do that. If you can, pay off the credit balance, whatever the interest-bearing amount is, every single month, because that way you're not paying interest to the credit card company, and you're proving, hey, I'm not going to just pay the minimum balance. I'm going to keep my credit utilization low. That just means you have a $1,000 credit card limit. You want to keep that less than 30% is very, very important. So $1,000 credit card limit, try and not have a balance of more than $300 recurring every month. Very, very important for your credit score. And if you don't have any credit, say you're credit invisible, you're unbanked, or if you know somebody who's young coming out of high school, you can go ahead and you can follow these steps. So you could get a secured credit card where you have cash as collateral, and you can show, okay, I'm going to have this. You could get a student credit card. You can use your credit card responsibly, not maxing out your credit limit. So those are all really good things that you can do as you start out on this journey. Understand how much I'm making. Okay, I got a budget. All right, I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to start building my credit. I'm going to go from a 600 to an 800. These are all things that you can do to empower yourselves from a financial literacy perspective. Thrivent and Discover Credit Card did this survey on financial literacy, and they said 9 out of 10 people stress about their finances on a weekly or a monthly basis. So if you feel overwhelmed by this stuff or by your own personal finances, you're not alone. But the step is that you need to take accountability and understand how these things work so you can take control. The end of that survey basically said the people that became more financially literate felt like they were happier in their lives at work. They felt like they had more time to exercise. They felt like they were more in control of their future in general. These are all really, really, really important things. If you feel like you haven't taken the step yet to start learning more about these, now's the time. It's never too late. Okay, so scams. Again, as we start working up, you're like, okay, awesome. Tackling these things. I'm working on my credit. I'm starting to save. I'm starting to invest. I've seen multiple people come in my office as a financial planner that have fallen victims to scams. $300,000, $150,000 gone just like that. You don't think that it can happen to you. I've seen multiple cases where it seems, oh, this was the person that I knew. They're asking me for this money. It was an imposter. So you really have to stay up with the latest trends. With AI getting incredibly good, they can use voice, they can use recognition to essentially spoof and act like a family member you know. So if you ever have someone reach out to you, they're asking for gift cards, check the spelling and the grammar, you really have to be very skeptical, kind of put on your hat of, seems like an odd request. Hang up. It's your financial institution spoofing you, asking for passwords, logins, credentials. Hang up, get the actual number, call them back. Don't give them any information immediately on the line. They're going to be trying to be really urgent. Hey, we need this now. Or, your family member was in a wreck or they're in jail. We need you to wire money and give us money now. Do not do that. Try and stay calm. Understand this is exactly what the scammers are trying to make you feel, is a sense of urgency, right? So really think through kind of all these things if you're in that situation, and share these tips with family members too. The people that they really try and go after are people that are retired, people that are 65, 70, Social Security fraud. There's a lot of different things that they'll target for people that have accumulated a lot of money. So share this with people that you know too, just to be very diligent and be very skeptical if someone's reaching out that you don't know. All right, so we talked a little bit about risk. As, again, you start to progress, you start to, okay, all right, I'm taking care of things. Or even if you're at a point where you're just starting out, I've seen so many people say, I have $250,000, $300,000 of medical debt because I didn't have any health insurance. That can ruin your life. That can force you to have to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, start over. You have a hit on your credit score for 10 years, right? So insurance, I know it's really expensive nowadays. Car insurance is sky high, but you're mitigating risk of something horrible happening that could ruin your life or really set you back financially. So it's not something that you should really kind of brush aside. Having insurance is absolutely necessary. There's still ways that you can go about trying to find cheaper insurance. I highly recommend shopping around for any of these types of insurance, but just knowing that it serves a purpose to manage risk, to protect you financially. So taxes. I told you guys I love taxes. Okay, so basic terms here when it comes to taxes. Taxable income is what the government's looking at as anything that is an exchange of service for money is what they're going to look at as income. W-2 statement. For your job at the end of the year, they're going to issue you a W-2. And that is going to be, okay, here's what we're reporting to the IRS is your wages, here are all the deductions. It's going to list all those things. Here's how much you held back for federal taxes, state taxes. That gets submitted to the IRS. They're going to see your transcripts. Don't even try and think about underreporting any of that. The IRS will know. So that's important to know what that is. What is not on here is the W-4. So when you first start working, your W-4 is what lists. They'll ask you, how many dependents do you have? Are you married? And those things are important because that's going to dictate what gets taken out of your check. So again, if at the end of the year you're like, man, government, they're screwing me. I owe $3,000 every year. That is just you not realizing that the amount of tax that you should be taking out needs to be more. Conversely, you get a huge refund. That's awesome. But you've been paying too much money to the government throughout the year through your taxes, through your paychecks. And if you want to pay them less and not give them a loan, you can decrease the amount of deductions or decrease the amount of tax coming out and try and get your refund as close to zero as possible. 1040, if you're looking at your taxes on TurboTax, all that is a summary of your income, listing all your deductions, your credits, child tax credit. That's what a 1040 is. So if you're thinking about, oh my gosh, what are all these things when I hear them? It's important to know basic terminology. So for the future, and Joel's going to come up and talk a lot about investing, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's really important for you all to know these basic terms and understand what's the difference between a stock, ownership of a company, right? You're buying Apple, hoping that they continue to make a lot of phones that people are going to continue to buy, and that the stock price is going to go from $250 to $500, and you can make money and outpace inflation by owning shares of companies, right? That's all stocks are. Bonds, you're lending money to an organization, could be the government, could be a company. They're going to pay you back your money plus interest. That's all bonds are. So it could be the U.S. government, could be Apple lending you money. It could be CDs, banks, you lend them money, they pay you back. Mutual funds is just a collection of stocks or bonds that you can buy that somebody manages for you, and you're hoping they do a good job and that all the asset amounts go up in value, or they're paying you interest and dividends. The exchange is just where you buy it. Return on investment is when we looked at those baby bonds, that was assuming a 7% return on investment over that time period. So between what you're invested in, stocks and bonds, that's the amount that you're going to be using to try and kind of make projections on retirement or saving for a house or saving for education. And then lastly, philanthropy is another thing that's really, really huge. So you get to the point where you start to save and accumulate. That's amazing. You can start to give that back to your community and organizations that really need it. It can be time, it can be your talents, but it can be your money and your finances as well. So that's also really important. And then lastly, I've got one last slide. This just shows the argument for investing. So the bottom line in red is the purchasing power of $1 starting in 1995, 30 years ago. Because of inflation, it has eroded your purchasing power. You can really see it go down right after COVID. Everybody knows that the price of houses have basically gone up 50% since 2020. Your purchasing power, if you had $1 in 1995, would buy you 47 cents worth of goods now. So you don't want to just keep all your money in savings for the long term, because you will get eaten alive by inflation. Conversely, if you put $1 into the stock market, the S&P 500, could be real estate, could be anything. If you're investing in something that's going to appreciate in value, the S&P, because you're getting those compound returns every year, 10%, 10%, 10%, has grown from $1 to $20 at the end of 30 years. So that's the real importance of investing, is to keep up with inflation. It's not just to accumulate as much money as possible, but it's to fund your long-term goals, retirement, things that you actually care about, to free you up the time to spend on the things you care about. So that's all I have for you. Thanks so much for your attention.